I want to start today in Matthew chapter 2. It's the story of those wise men. I love to read it with you. If you have your Bible, go to Matthew 2. There's Bibles in the back at the resource table. You're welcome to go grab one. They're the New Living Translation, which is what we typically read out of. If you have our app, then there's also the Bible in there. So there's no excuses to not read the Bible, right? Plus, it'll be right there in gigantic font. So just follow along with me as I read Matthew chapter 2. In verse 1, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. And about that time, some wise men, there's the characters in today's story. Jesus is the main character, but today this is the most important supporting cast in today's message. These wise men did a lot of research on the wise men. The Greek word is actually magi. In the video, they mentioned that. Another definition, they're royal astronomers. So these are guys that for a living are looking at the stars. They're educated men who specialized in astronomy, astrology, and the natural sciences. So we'll start there. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But they arrived in Jerusalem and they began asking around, where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose and we've come to worship him. In verse 3, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this. King Herod is saying, in essence, I'm the king of the Jews. And so what's this talk about another king of the Jews? And so he was angry, and so was everyone else in Jerusalem. Verse 4, he called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law. He got the preachers together, and he asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? And here was the preacher's answer. In Bethlehem in Judea, they said, for this is what the prophet wrote. This is pulled directly from the prophet Micah. And it says, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. So then Herod wraps up that meeting, and then in verse 7, he called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared, because they were stargazers, they were astronomers, and so they were able to remember, probably had documents when they first saw the star. So they told King Herod when the star first appeared. And then in verse 8, then he told them, go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too. Well, if you've read a little further into the story, maybe you looked ahead, you know this is not at all what King Herod wanted to do. He actually wanted to kill Jesus. But the wise men, the magi, the royal astronomers, they were happy to go. So after this interview, verse 9, the wise men went their way, and the star that they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them, and it stopped over the place where the child was. And then verse 10 hits. When they saw the star, they were filled with what? They're filled with joy. Joy is what I want to talk to us about today. It says, when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. We'll stick a pin in that and come back to it. Verse 11, so they entered the house and they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and they gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I want to talk to us today about joy. And I'm excited to preach the message about joy. In fact, when we first laid out the message series, this was one I was excited to preach about. But I'm preaching a message completely different than I imagined I'd be preaching today. When you do that 30,000-foot view, what you imagine preaching about, a Christmas message about joy, I'm not preaching that message today. It's not at all the message I imagined giving today, but it's a message that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is the message for you and for me today, and it's relevant to everyone in the room. But before I get to that message, since the message is so different than I imagined preaching, I just want to make two quick observations from the text that I don't want us to miss. It's kind of helped me as I re-looked at this Christmas story. So these won't be on the screen. This is like the pre-message. This is like the scrimmage message. This is free with the price of admission. You don't have to pay anything additional. But this is the pre-message. And there's two things I want us to draw out of this. Number one, that God used something very familiar to the wise men to help them find Jesus. As I thought about that this week, Sometimes if you're like me, you read these things and you read the wise men and they got to Jesus by following a star. And there are times that I go, Jesus, why can't you show me a star? Like, why can't I see you? I want to look up and say, that must be the star of Jesus. And I don't know if I should go this route or take this job or that job or move to this neighborhood or that neighborhood. And then Jesus will give us a star and we'll just follow it and we'll know that we're in his plan. Well, he used a star because they were what? Astronomers. And I was reminded this week that that's how good that God is. He uses things that he's pre-wired us with interests in to show us himself. Which is to say, like for me, I love to ride my motorcycle. I love to jump on my Harley and just take off down the road. And especially when there's water nearby, I love that ride. And there are times that when I'm on my motorcycle and I dial into the things of God, begin to have a time of prayer or worship. It's such an amazing time of connection with God because he is wanting to be found, and he many times can be found in the places that most interest me. That's how he wired us. Jeremiah 29, it won't be on the screen, but Jeremiah 29 says, where's it at? I think I did that verse. No, I didn't do that verse. Yeah, I did. Jeremiah 29:13. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be found by you, says the Lord. I just wanted to start in my pre-message, that's not really my actual message, and just say that I want to encourage you to look for Jesus and the things that he's wired you to enjoy. He can be found there. He did that for the wise men. And secondly, I'm actually want to just real quickly talk about the quote at the end of that video. There was a quote at the end when the narrator was standing up and he said, "What else can you do but rejoice when you realize that the journey was always leading you to Jesus?" I mean, when he first said it, I was like, wow. That's really good. And then I played it back. And the more I listened to it, the more I actually struggled with it because that's idealistic. I want to have that kind of faith. I want to have that kind of confidence. But I've been on some journeys that I can't imagine that they had anything to do with Jesus. And there are times that I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be in the middle of something that's the hardest thing I've gone through, maybe something brutally difficult. Maybe you're in the middle of that thing right now. And the last thing I wanted to do was say, just rejoice because it's leading you to Jesus. And you're like, well, I don't want this journey no matter where it leads me to. Then I realized that it says, what else can you do but rejoice when you realize? So there's times on the journey that you just haven't realized it yet. It reminded me of kind of a funny, goofy story. I was on a Daddy Maddie date. My daughter's here today. This is about 8 years ago, and so she would have been probably 11, maybe 10, and we went to Scandia, that joint down the 80, and we had a great day. We love to hang out, and well, at least I do. She tolerates her daddy, and so we were at Scandia again 7, 8 years ago. So my daughter was much younger, and we did the putt-putt thing, and then we did the bumper boats, and we did that. You get on a burlap sack, and you go down the thing. We did the arcades, and then my daughter, she said, "Daddy, can we ride the Scandia Screamer?" I did not want to be a dad anymore in that moment. I did not want to be. I wanted to stop being a dad, but my daughter said to me, she said, "Daddy, we always overcome our fears together." I mean, that's twisted. Like she would even think that. But she's right. Ordinarily, the fears that she's talking about is like jumping in the deep end of the pool or climbing up this rock or something like that. But this one, this is not helping her overcome her fear. This dad was scared to death. I don't like heights. I don't like rides. I don't like any of those things. But she said she wanted help overcoming her fear. And so I said, okay, let's get in. So I got in. And I just want to say that the guy that was managing the ride he was sadistic. Probably demon-possessed, because, see, he just kept holding us up there in the very top, and then you're rocking, and I'm looking at Maddie, and I'm like, baby, we don't have to do this, baby. It's okay. She's like, Daddy, I love this. And I'm like, please say, no, you don't love this. And we're like 12,000 feet in the air on the Scandia Screamer thing, and it goes backwards, and it spins, and every time we would go to the bottom, I'm like, baby, we can stop. Let's just tell him we'll stop. And she didn't want to stop. And then he holds us up there again, It's like this. It's like 25,000 feet up in the air this time, and eventually we get off of the ride, and I'm sick to death. I hated everything about that, and I actually we just talked about this earlier today. We drove home, and I pull into the garage, and I go inside, and I I get sick. I actually throw up because I don't do rides. I don't like those kinds of things, and I hated. It ruined the date for me. I would never tell Maddie that, but it ruined the date for me, except for the fact that she was telling the story to her mom, and she got excited when she said, me and Daddy overcame my fear. Listen, I still hated the Scandia Screamer. Like, Jesus loved the guy that was working the ride. I was struggling too, but I hated everything about it. I hated the fact that it rocked, but all of a sudden, I didn't celebrate the ride, but I could understand that I would do it again if I had to, because it ultimately brought me to a place where my daughter could look at her daddy and say, my daddy helped me with something. I didn't want to do this, but my daddy helped me. And then I realized that there was something there that was actually worth being a part of. I don't have to like anything about the ride to have gone through something and to be able to say, God did something really important in that. And it happened in that same passage that we read, Matthew chapter 2. This one, it'll be on the screen, but it's in the Amplified version. In verse 9, it says, after hearing the king, they went their way, and behold, the star, which they had seen in the east, went on before them. The Amplified says, it's continually leading the way. So they're seeing this star day in and day out until it came and stood over the place where the young child was. And then verse 10, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. I had to ponder this first because they've been seeing stars their whole life. That's what they do for a living. In fact, we'll talk later in the message about that journey that they went on, and it was a very long, difficult journey. But it says here when they saw the star, well, they've been seeing stars, but go back to that verse right before it, leading the way until it came and stood over the place where the young child was. In a moment, all of a sudden, the journey made sense because it finally stopped over the destination. And it's in that moment that we can begin to rejoice exceedingly with great joy. Since this is not my message and it's just my pre-message, I just wanted to tell you that, can I just encourage you to not get off? You might be a few miles away from the journey that you're on making sense. And I just wanted to encourage you that there will eventually, you might not be able to rejoice in the details of the journey, but there will be a moment, I believe this with every ounce of me, because I've read God's faithfulness in His Word, and I'm the older I get, the more I see truth in a God that is able to take any ingredients and work them together for our good. And I don't want you to get off the journey or start doubting God, because eventually the journey will make sense. I just wrote this down. It's not profound, but it just helped me. I put it on the screen. Joy might not come until the journey makes sense. And since I'm talking about joy, I wanted to say to you, if you don't feel it today, that's okay. The journey might not be making sense yet, and they didn't rejoice exceedingly glad until the star finally stopped. And then I just want to say that I've said this a whole bunch since I started leading a church, and an average God can take great things and do great things, great ingredients and turn them into great things. An average God could do that, but I promise you that we serve the kind of God that can take any ingredients, the seeming worst of the worst, the ashes, and make beautifully great things out of those. Anyone He's done that in your life, say amen. That's our God. So I started thinking through the message, and I just wanted to encourage those that don't feel that joy to just hang in there. And that's kind of where the message launched from. As I was thinking through building a message and preaching a Christmas message about joy, I thought I knew exactly what I was going to preach about, the joy to the world message. And when I'm prepping a message, I typically start just really kind of just in meditation and prayer. And just seeking the heart of God, asking for, like, what's the heart? Like, what's the heart of God for our church? And a lot of times it'll start with a verse, or it'll start with, I'll remember like a passage of Scripture, and I'll start mining that passage of Scripture and seeing what's there. And over and over and over, this verse kept coming to my mind on the content, on the topic of joy. And this is the verse, so I wanted to read it to you. In James 1:2, it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great" what? Joy. Yeah, and I read this and I thought to myself, God, this is a horrible Christmas message. I don't want to preach about trials. I don't want to preach about difficulty. It's joy to the world. The Lord has come. Let heaven and earth rejoice. And I said, this isn't a good Christmas message. And I would put it to the side and I would reread the Christmas message. And then this verse would just stir in my spirit. And I'd read it again. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. And I would think to myself, but God, this isn't a very good Christmas message. And then the Spirit of God said, this is the Christmas message. This is the light of the world into the dark place. This is the silence of 400 years being broken. This is the sinfulness, the brokenness, all of humanity destined to be apart from God until Jesus came. And that's where the great joy in every circumstance comes from. So this is the Christmas message. And so I wanted to talk to us today about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I don't even want to set it up. I want a different preacher to set it up. I'm going to play a video. I've never done this in a message where one of my intro is preached by a different preacher, but I just didn't want to try to re-say his story. This man that's going to be on the screen is a hero of mine, has shaped me in the context of understanding God and understanding the heart of ministry like no one else has. This man is responsible for starting the Passion Movement, which is where we get guys like Chris Tomlin and David Crowder and Charlie Hall and Matt Redman. The contemporary worship movement, really this guy was at the heart of starting it all. And he's going to expose a difficult season in his life that he is still wrestling with. And I wanted to let this be the intro to the message, and then I want to talk to us today about joy. Watch this.
Scientists tell us, and we would have to agree, that we are addicted to technology. And scientists tell us that our relational skills are dwindling. Families are splitting up. Kids are left to fend for themselves and grow up far faster than in the generations before. Anxiety has seated almost every family table. Kids live in a fishbowl of comparison, and even if you wanted to, you cannot escape a world that bullies anyone and everyone it sees fit to do so. So it's no wonder when you read study after study after study that teens and young people in their 20s are battling depression at unprecedented rates. It's a reality. It's complex. Depression is complex. Mental illness is complex, but it's here and it's in all of our lives. And if you are in the middle of this storm, you already know that's true. I want to make sure we say tonight that mental illness is not a one-size-fits-all problem. Mental illness happens for a lot of different reasons. It happens because of trauma in our lives. It happens because of genetic circumstances in our life. It happens because of chemical imbalances in our life. It happens because of stress in our lives, external circumstances in our life. Mental illness sometimes is a result of our own personal failures that we're trying to keep the world from knowing about. A lot of things can cause mental illness. And the problem with mental illness, one of the great frustrations of mental illness, is you can't see it and you can't touch it. A scientist can't show it to you on a sonogram or an MRI or a CAT scan or a blood test. That there are symptoms for sure that you can see, but you can't see mental illness, and that makes it even more frustrating for people who are fighting and struggling against it. And so obviously there's no three-step formula, right? There's no simple answer, there's no Band-Aid, and that's why I'm not going to try to give a lot of quips tonight, and I'm not going to try to offer any one-size-fits-all solution tonight. I, on the other hand, even as a believer in Jesus Christ, want to respect the force of mental illness. It has the power to steal and to kill and to destroy. And I believe that the church is only going to be able to get into the conversation in the way that we need to once the church wakes up and understands the power of the grip of darkness that people are struggling with and facing in their lives. We can't just push it aside. We can't just say, oh, you can get over that. We can't just give a simple little bumper sticker size answer to people. We've got to respect that we are talking about a powerful force when we talk about mental illness. If you haven't had suicidal thoughts, then I'm just telling you, you can't fully understand. That's not a knock on you. It's just a reality that you have to step into. I don't really fully understand what that battle would look like. And even those of us who have been through severe depression, like myself, we don't even fully understand what we've been through. But not understanding isn't going to give us an out to be silent. We're not going to go silently. No, we're going to stand up and speak up. And tonight, we are shining a light into the darkness, even a darkness that maybe we don't fully understand, because we do understand Jesus. And Jesus is the light in the darkness. Depression does its work, its best work in the dark. And tonight, all of us have the opportunity to step out of the night and into light, to step out of the isolation that can be depression and into community where we can be honest about who we are and what we're struggling with. And in stepping into the light, something can change. I am not a doctor. I am not an expert. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've been down in the pit of depression. Most everybody in this church knows this, but I will say it again. I've been down in the place where lies incubate. I've been down in the place where I never thought I was going to be myself again. I've been down in the place where I thought I was losing my mind. And if you've been there, you can relate, and and I can relate to you. I have been in that place where hope seems to be extinguished. But I'm telling you, and I'll say it 1,000 times, with the help of doctors and with Jesus and with the weapon of worship, I made it back to the land of the living, and by the grace of God, I'm standing here right now.
The hard part with these kinds of conversations is just the different journeys that we're all on. And in a season like Christmas, there's just this sense that we are all supposed to be full of joy. This morning, the message that I wanted to share is that there are some people that are around you, likely sitting in your same row, that don't get the luxury of choosing joy. They wake up and don't understand why, but there's just a cloud of discouragement and depression that they can't shake, and yet there's this expectation to be full of joy, and there's a yearning to be joyful, and they don't know where to begin to get there. And I believe the church has got to be a place to have the kinds of conversations that say, that's okay. We can be there with you. You don't have to choose an emotion that you can't really feel. We can get to where you are too. And the thing, when Louis said that, I want you to know, I relate so much to what he said. My mom and dad are both on medication for depression, and I come from the genetic side of it, the deepest, darkest depression. And Louis mentioned it was times in my life where I was running from God's best for me. I was choosing to live in sin, and then deeper than that, I was hiding the reality that I was living in sin. And the Spirit of God that I knew well was calling me out of the darkness and into the light, and living in that tension just created some dark depression and discouragement, where I was losing a sense of identity. I have been, the first time I went and talked to a doctor about mental health, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. Well, that didn't seem to help. The medication, I didn't even take that medication because that was a 5-minute conversation, and the doctor knew that about me, and that bothered me. So I decided to go begin to talk to a therapist. I've been talking to the same therapist for 3 years, and so about 3 or 4 months after talking to my therapist, I went to the doctor again, a different doctor, and I was talking to this guy for literally 2 minutes, and he said he diagnosed me with bipolar, and he gave me a prescription and sent me on my way. I had no idea what to do with that information. My therapist said, "You're not bipolar, you may be cyclothymic at best." I don't know what any of these words mean. And then now I go back and I take a couple different anxiety medications to manage anxiety. I don't know that I understand the craziness of mental health. And when I say craziness, you're not crazy, but you can feel like you're wrapped up in a whole bunch of crazy. And I just needed somebody in this room to know today that it's okay to be here and to be in that place. And you can come to this place and you can belong on the journey of you trying to make sense of these kinds of things. Anybody else agree with that? Thank you. 3 of you. 3 of you agree with that. I wanted to, 3 things I just wanted to say to you today, and I'm going to be pretty passionate about it because this is something that means a lot to me. Look, I don't want to pastor if I can't pastor and we deal with things that people all around us need to be talking about. I don't want to talk about cute, packaged up little things. I want to talk about the things that Jesus came to talk about. And he said, I came for the sick. I came for the outsiders. And that's Converge, who we're going to be for. That's who we're going to try to connect the story of the gospel with. And as your pastor, as your friend, maybe you look up to me, then as a mentor, whatever I get to be in your life, I just wanted to come and say 3 things to you today very quickly. And the first is that you're not alone. And listen, man, this depression, that one of the prime, most guttural emotions that happens when you feel depressed it's a deep, deep, deep sense of loneliness. And you guys will understand this because everyone's felt this at some degree, but it doesn't matter how many people are around you when you're dealing with depression, you feel alone. And I wanted to say to you, that's why I shared a little bit about my story. I want you to know that you're not alone because I'm with you in this. You're not alone because guys like Louis, guys that are changing the world, are in this with you. And then not only that, I want to look at the guy named David really quick. And in Psalm chapter 42, David says this. He said, my heart is breaking as I remember how it used to be. He's saying, my best days are behind me. I walked among the crowds of worshipers, leading a great procession to the house of God. I was singing for joy and giving thanks amid the sound of a great celebration. He's talking about the yesterday days, and then he makes a turn in verse 5. Why am I so discouraged? Why is my heart so sad? Guys in the Bible if David was alive today, he'd probably be on some kind of medication. Read the Psalms. He's got real high highs and real low lows. David is a guy that he was comfortable talking about his emotions. And let me just say, I wrote these verses down. I skipped them, but I'm going to read them. I believe these verses in Philippians 4:4. It says, always be full of joy in the Lord. Again, I say rejoice. I believe that with every ounce of me. Psalm 68:3, but let the godly rejoice. Let them be glad in God's presence. Let them be filled with joy. Nehemiah 8:10 says, the joy of the Lord is my what? Joy of the Lord is my strength. And I believe those verses with every ounce of me, but I also believe, as Louis pointed out, that there is a great enemy trying to steal, kill, and destroy those truths in our life. And I needed you to know that you're not alone in that battle. And interestingly enough, I just read a verse that David wrote. The Christmas story actually starts in Matthew chapter 1. This is just the first verse of Matthew chapter 1. The very opening statement is this. It'll be on the screen. It says, this is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of who? David. Jesus was, his messianic title is attached to a man named David. You know, when the demon-possessed woman wanted healed, she said, Jesus, son of David. When the blind man wanted healed, he said, Jesus, son of David. 18 times in the Gospels, people are saying, Jesus, son of David. That's his messianic title. That's the prophets of old said he'd be a son of David. Jesus, his messianic power is attached to someone that struggled to feel the joy of the Lord sometimes. It's okay. I wanted to say this to the people in the room that maybe this isn't your story. Man, I just want to say, I just praise God for that in your life. I'm so grateful. There's diabetics in the room. I don't take insulin. And so I can't imagine having to take insulin all the time. But there are others that have chemical imbalances and they're taking medication to try to manage that thing. And if you're not, I just want to say, you just thank God for your mental health. But listen, if joy comes really naturally for you this time of year, will you please be aware of and patient with those with whom it won't? Church, if this isn't your story and you're like Buddy the Elf, you're like just, you're the most childlike sense of Christmas spirit on the planet, and even as I'm preaching this message, you're like, man, this is just a really sad message. Well, no, it's not a sad message. It's a real message, and I want to say to you, Mr. or Mrs. Buddy the Elf, can I just ask you to be aware of and very patient with the folks with whom it's not going to be very easy to choose joy? I wasn't going to share it, but I will. My wife screenshotted a couple of things yesterday. My wife is Buddy the Elf. She's like, what would the female name be? Like Budalina the Elf or something? I mean, it annoys me. I'm just throwing it out there. I love my wife, but she is Sister Christmas, and she is just, the Christmas spirit just oozes out of her. She screenshotted for me. We do the Instacart thing quite often. And so she did the Instacart thing, and this is my wife. Like, she's the lady that was doing the shopping said they don't have this, but they had this. Anybody else do Instacart or has done Instacart? Okay, when they can't find your thing, they take a picture of what they have and they say, will this work instead? It's a substitution. And apparently this lady that sent this picture to my wife had like nice looking nails or something. So my wife says, oh my goodness, your nails are so cute. And then the lady says, oh my goodness, thank you so much. And then so they had this back and forth thing. And then the lady whose nails are cute, our Instacart shopper, says, hey, thank you for being kind to me today, because this is a really hard Christmas. My dad died a year ago, my mom a week ago, and I'm dreading the Christmas season. And so my wife began to minister to her on Instacart message. And then when the lady gets to our house with the groceries, my wife had ran upstairs and grabbed the gift and had wrapped it up and taken it and gave it to the Instacart lady and said, I just wanted you to have this. It was a candle, and I wanted you to have some light this year in Christmas time, and just know that we think a lot about you and we care a lot about you, and we see you and we see your struggle. And the lady just began to cry, and my wife's crying. And when she told me that story, I'm saying, this is the message, babe. That those who aren't struggling would look for ways to love on and to pour into those who might be. Because we're not alone. We need each other. Secondly, I would say this. I've said this a bunch of times, but it's okay to not be okay. Can we be okay with that? Can we be okay that it's okay to not be okay? If you can be okay with that, just look to a direction and tell the person around you, hey, it's okay to not be okay. Do that. I appreciate you. You were wondering if you were going to, and then you decided to. I appreciate it. It's okay to not be okay. In fact, I quoted this verse earlier. It's in the Message. And Luke chapter 5, verse 31, Jesus heard about it and he spoke up. Who needs a doctor, the healthy or the sick? I'm here inviting outsiders, not insiders, an invitation to a changed life, changed inside and out. Jesus He came for the people that aren't doing okay, and they're aware of it. They're in need of a Savior. They have broken lives, and that's who Jesus came to minister to. I heard a preacher say one time, if you're just convinced that you're okay, you'll probably never get the miracle of Jesus, because he didn't come for you. He came for those that are comfortable saying, I'm not okay. And all of us at some time or another have to be okay to say, I'm not okay. And the gospel story, I just want to drive by these really fast. If you want them, you can shoot me an email and I'll shoot them over to you. I didn't put them on the screen, but I'm just going to rapid fire. Psalm 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted and he binds up their wounds. It's okay to not be okay. The Bible has stories written saying he gets to where you are when you're not okay. Psalm 73:26, my heart and my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart. He is my portion forever. Psalm 34:18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. You notice he doesn't say that we should get over our brokenheartedness or get over our crushed in spirit. No, it says that heaven is dispatched and the Lord goes near to the people who are brokenhearted and who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 55:22, cast your burden on the Lord and he will sustain you. Psalm 27:5, for he will hide me in his shelter in my day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your anxieties on him because he what? Because he cares for you. 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. I just talked about the Luke passage where it says that Jesus came for those that felt like they were on the outside. He didn't come for the healthy. He came for the sick. And this is a direct reference to the religious people. In that passage of Scripture, the religious people who snubbed their nose at people that didn't always have it together. Jesus is saying, well, I came for the people that know they don't have it together. And then this passage here, it says, when you don't have it together, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect. The power of Jesus is completed, activated in your weakness. Which brings me to the third thing I wanted to say today. It's okay to not be okay because Jesus is more than okay. Listen, it's okay to not be okay. That's fine. That means we can sit in it. That means that we can be patient in the process. But we are the church. We are the bride of Christ. We have the hope of the world. And so it's okay to not be okay. We can sit there, but I also need you to know that that's not a complete statement. The complete statement as the church is, it's okay to not be okay because Jesus is way more than okay. And so we can bring our brokenness to the one who wants to sit with us and bind up our wounds in the middle of it. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus, this will be on the screen. Then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. I'm going to read it again, and I'm just going to read it over your heart this morning. Then Jesus said to you, friend, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. And Jesus says, I will give you rest. You don't have to be okay. You just got to come to the one who is so much more than okay. As the band comes, I wanted to go back to that quote from the video. Remember, what else can you do but rejoice when you realize that the journey was always leading you to Jesus? I did some research. For these magi or these wise men, it was a 700 to 900 mile journey to Bethlehem from the capital city in Jerusalem. Just so that you know, that's around a 6-week journey on a camel, or about 2.5 months on foot. So to get to Jesus Following the star, that's about 6 weeks on a camel or 2.5 months on foot. I wasn't planning to ask this, but out of curiosity, has anybody ever rode a camel? Any camel riders in the room? Kim, okay? Just scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable was it? Yeah, I was imagining that. I was just imagining that would be horrible. And I don't know if they walked or if they rode a camel, but it's 6 weeks on the back of a camel, which according to Kim is a horrible experience, or it's 2.5 months on foot. And by the way, we're going through the Middle East. We're going through the desert. And so they experience all kinds of troubles along the way. But there was the star that was beckoning them to come to Jesus and to lay what they brought with them at the feet of the one who was calling them. And then we read in Matthew chapter 11:28 that Jesus is still saying, come. He said to the wise men, a 6-week or 2.5 month journey, he said, come to me. And I'll give you rest. I will worship me here in this place. And then Jesus says it again, come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. The star was the invitation to the Magi, the astronomers, and the wise men to come to Jesus. And in coming to Jesus, he could make sense of the journey and even finally be the joy of the journey. I didn't say that he would be the joy in the journey. They're different. It's okay to say riding on a camel is horrible. It's okay to say they probably got hungry and exhausted and beaten down by the sand. They don't have to be joy in the journey, but Jesus can make sense of the journey. And the star was leading the Magi, and Jesus is the bright and morning star. He says that in Revelation chapter 22, verse 16 and 17. It says, I, Jesus, sent my angel to testify to these things for the churches. I'm the root and branch of David. I am the what? Bright morning star. The same star that led the Magi and the wise men. He is beckoning you and me. He says, I'm the branch of David, the one who had trouble with his emotions that my messianic title is attached to because I'm comfortable being around people that aren't okay because I'm more than okay, Jesus says. Then he says, come to me, I'm the bright and morning star. Come, says the Spirit of the bride. Whoever hears, echo, come. Is anyone thirsty? Come. All who will, come and drink. Drink freely of the water of life. And we know from the conversation with the woman at the well, you will never, ever thirst again. The invitation for us is the same invitation that the wise men received. Come and worship Jesus. I'm not telling you that you will love the journey anymore. Oh, but invite Jesus into the journey. Whatever amount of joy you feel or don't feel, did you know that he's comfortable with your downheartedness? He's comfortable with your brokenness. The song even says he'll bind up your wounds. The journey can be hard, and your journey might be brutal. Oh, but there is one that's trying to say to you and me this morning, no matter what your journey is, he will be the joy. He'll make sense of the journey. And I just wanted for you to know today that in this season, if you find this season being a difficult one, that's okay. Man, that's okay. You can come in here every week and be exactly where you are and know that you belong here exactly the way that where you are. But can I just encourage you that the one who says come is trying to meet you there to help shift and change the circumstances. Jesus doesn't say, yeah, you're brokenhearted. See ya. We should leave with the understanding of the one who is binding up our wounds, who is meeting us in the middle of it, and let the one who is saying come begin to shift and change and to bring joy to joyless places, to make beautiful things from the ashes of our lives. Because last week we read that Jesus, he said he stood up and read, if you remember, he read from the prophet Isaiah about he'll make the blind see, he'll make the crooked path straight, he'll rebuild the cities that are broken down in our lives. And then he sat back down and Jesus said, that's me, I'm the one who wants to do that. And the one who wants to do that is opening up the invitation today to come. Let me repair the broken places, bind up the hurting hearts. And so the band's going to sing a song that's just perfect. Oh, come. Are you hurting and broken within? The invitation is to come. And I would say if you're comfortable with it, maybe pop by and find me and see me. If you want to talk about how you can really engage with the story of Jesus and begin to walk with Jesus, I would love to meet you there. If you head out this theater and you go left whenever everybody's dismissed, on the left side is the prayer team. You can walk in there and you can say, I have some brokenheartedness in my life, and I just wanted to say to somebody so that you'll be praying for me, and we'll be praying for you. This season, for those of us in the room that this isn't your story and joy is just overflowing. Converge, can we be intentional? Whether it be to an Instacart lady or someone we meet on the street or someone here in the community. If you're having no problem discover joy, well then let's be aware of and very patient with those that have experienced loss and heartbreak as they go into the holiday season. And let's be a safe place for people to wrestle through the mysteries of discouragement, depression, anxiety. If you want to talk about finding a therapist, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a therapist. I'm trying to be a better listener, but I'll help you run the bases to find somebody to talk to, find a therapist. So you want to start saying something out loud about your journey with mental health, you can start with me. It's a passion of my life to be a safe place for folks to begin that conversation. Let's sing.